The lights in the VIP lounge flicker as the crowd's laughter rolls like distant thunder. Elvis, still riding the high of his evening performance, leans back in his chair, the soft glow of neon tracing his silhouette. At the bar, a burly ex-Marine, tattoos coiling up his forearms, clinks his glass for attention. He sizes up Presley with a crooked grin and shouts, "They say Elvis knows karate?" I thought that was just fancy hand-waving. A ripple of amusement spreads through the room. Guests nudge one another, raising eyebrows. Elvis's lips curve into a polite smile, but his eyes flash steel. The easy camaraderie of applause has vanished, replaced by a hush of anticipation. In that charged moment, even the band's distant riff seems muted. Something unspoken hangs in the air. This will not be forgotten. The dojo smelled of sweat and aged wood, each floorboard bearing the scuff of countless bare feet. A single paper lantern flickered in the corner, casting trembling shadows across the tatami mats. It was 1958, and Elvis Presley, fresh from his tour of duty in Germany, stripped of the uniforms and stiff protocols he'd known, stepped hesitantly through the low doorway. His dark hair, combed back and still gleaming, gave him the look of a young movie star. Yet here he was among karate students whose discipline knew no audience. Sensei Tetsuzen Futaki stood at the room's far edge, arms folded beneath his white belt. His face was a map of time and toughness. Deep-set eyes, a jaw as solid as cedar. He wore a simple gi, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms thick with quiet strength. He did not rise to greet this visitor. Elvis's reputation within these walls was supposed to remain invisible, but the hush that swallowed the room spoke volumes. Elvis bowed stiffly, knees touching the mat. "Sensei," he said, voice hushed, but carrying a resolve that surprised even him. Murmurs rippled through the gathered students. Not a soul knew why the glamorous figure seen on magazine covers walked among them now, except that he sought something no spotlight could illuminate. The first lesson came in the form of paddled targets, wooden makiwara standing sentinel against one wall. Futaki moved through the students, correcting posture, adjusting knuckles. When he reached Elvis, he tapped the board with a single knuckle. The sound cracked like a starter's pistol. "Show me your heart, not your fame," the master said. Elvis nodded, swallowed, and struck. The impact sent a tremor through his arm, less pain than shock, and a bruise blossomed on the bridge of his hand. He staggered back a step, eyes widening. A ripple of surprise ran through the room. The king of rock and roll, felled by a wooden post. Embarrassment quickened in Elvis's chest, but he steadied himself. This was no stage. There would be no chorus of cheers. Only truth. Over the next weeks, Elvis returned, night after night, slipping in just before last call at the nearby honky-tonk. He sat cross-legged by the wall during drills, absorbing stances and strikes in silence. His celebrity never mentioned. He was simply Reisho, aspiring student. Sparse instruction fell from Futaki's lips. "Control," he would say, voice like gravel. "Honor yourself by refusing to be used as spectacle." Elvis's life had become a carousel of bright lights and roaring applause. Here, he learned stillness. He learned that the power in his hands, once merely a performer's flair, could become something deeper, an extension of will tempered by restraint. His final test in the dojo arrived without fanfare. The night after a sold-out show in Memphis, Elvis donned a borrowed white belt and stood opposite a seasoned brown belt student named Ryuji, whose punches came like thunderclaps. Ryuji attacked swiftly, jabs, crosses, a spinning kick that whipped through the incense-tinged air. Elvis absorbed the rhythm, eyes flicking, to find the gaps between strikes. When Ryuji launched a high roundhouse, Elvis slipped the blow as silently as mist, pivoted, and delivered a precise palm strike to Ryuji's sternum. The student crumpled to one knee, winded but whole. The dojo fell so silent you could hear the pulsing of the paper lantern above. Sensei Futaki nodded once, gravely. "You have seen that violence need not be loud. You have learned why we train, to protect, not to perform." He turned away, dismissing the room, but Elvis remained kneeling, humbled by the weight of his own power. Word of the newcomer never reached tabloid pages. Elvis returned to his tours, to the roaring crowds and dazzling costumes, carrying in his knuckles the memory of wood and sweat and humility. And years later, when a would-be heckler mocked his soft hands in a Vegas lounge, Elvis's smile concealed the strength he'd forged in that small dojo on Montgomery Avenue, a power neither feigned nor televised, but born of discipline, respect, and the silent heart of a true student. The next afternoon's sun beat down on the dusty streets of Las Vegas like a belligerent spotlight. After a night of laughter and loose talk in the VIP lounge, Elvis Presley found himself back at his hotel suite well before dawn. He slept little, wrestling with the echo of jests flung at him by a circle of former Marines and local toughs who'd mocked his famed karate skills. By midday, word spread through the city that the king was planning something more than just songs. When Elvis stepped onto the stage at the Sahara's midnight matinee that evening, the audience expected his usual set. Shaking hips, ripping chords, old gospel standards. Instead, mid-show, the owner of the club, a rakish man named Frankie Cortez, took the microphone. His grin was wide, his tone patronizing. "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley has agreed to show us a little of the karate he picked up overseas. But don't worry, he's promised to keep it friendly. He's challenging a man right here tonight, without the cameras, just for us." A low murmur of surprise ran through the crowd. Elvis's pulse quickened. He'd agreed only because he believed any test of skill should remain private. An unspoken pact with his old sensei, Futaki. Public spectacle was the very thing he had tried so hard to avoid. But decline now would look like a dodge. He managed a single nod, eyes fixed on the spotlighted ring crudely taped on the showroom floor. Moments later, spotlight cut, and a hush fell. The challenger emerged from a side door. Captain Jack Crusher Monroe, once Elvis's drill sergeant during that cold winter in Würzburg, Germany, now a hulking champion in underground street fighting circles. Monroe's grin was predatory as he flexed his massive fists. He wore gleaming black trunks and a championship belt slung over one shoulder. Even under neon lights, Elvis could see the men in Monroe's corner. Toughs who looked ready to pounce the moment their man faltered. By the time Elvis climbed into the ring, sweat gleamed on his forehead. He wore a simple white GI top over tailored black trousers. No publicity stunt suit, but a nod to the martial path he had embraced. He bowed to Monroe, who slapped his palms together once, the echo resounding in the stunned quiet. No drums, no fanfare, just two men, once comrades in arms, now face to face under the desert sky. The bell rang, an old saxophone note broadcasting a beat-out for combat. Monroe advanced first, hands low, chin tucked. Elvis adopted the stance Futaki had drilled into him, right foot grinding back, left arm extended, eyes low. The crowd edged closer, some craning necks, cameras clicking. Monroe struck the first blow, a powerful lead jab straight to Elvis's ribs. Elvis exhaled, let the punch slide off his exposed side, then countered with a swift palm strike to Monroe's solar plexus. The air whooshed out of Monroe's lungs. He staggered but did not fall. The silence exploded into cheers and gasps. the audience suddenly alive to a spectacle that felt real. The two men traded blows, Elvis blocking with forearm blocks, catching Monroe's kicks with the flat of his palm. Each strike Elvis delivered was measured, precise. A hammer fist to Monroe's forearm, a low side kick that tapped Monroe's knee, a snap punch that slapped Monroe's cheek. The ring lights glared, illuminating the determination on Elvis's face. There was no swagger, no showboating, only a man honoring his craft. After several exchanges, Monroe lunged, swinging a wild hook that missed by inches. Elvis shifted his weight, stepped inside Monroe's guard, and executed a textbook hip throw, sending the former sergeant crashing onto the canvas. The impact was thunderous. A heartbeat later, Elvis extended his hand. Monroe, gasping for air, looked up at the calm in those dark eyes. He took the hand and was pulled to his feet. The crowd erupted, but Elvis raised a single finger to his lips. Silence reclaimed the room. He bowed to Monroe, then to the audience. Monroe, wiping sweat and pride from his brow, dropped to one knee, head bowed, a warrior's salute to a worthy opponent. That moment passed, and the fans leapt to their feet, giving a standing ovation that rattled the chandeliers. Backstage, Elvis shrugged off his GI top, muscles still humming with adrenaline. Frankie Cortez arrived, stunned, speechless, while Monroe slapped Elvis on the shoulder, laughter and respect rumbling in his chest. "You still got it, Presley," he managed through a grin. Elvis simply nodded, then caught sight of a single cameraman peering around the curtain. Footage from the bout would inevitably circulate. He shrugged. Some lessons, after all, had to be shared. As he returned to the stage for the final song, "If I Can Dream," Elvis sang not just for applause, but with the quiet knowledge that he had upheld a promise to his sensei, to himself, and to every soldier who ever learned discipline before drama. The melody soared into the night air, and people wept, not for a movie star, but for a man who had chosen integrity over image, and who had shown them all that true power speaks softly. He woke before dawn the next day, long before most of Las Vegas even stirred. The city's neon glow retreated behind his closed eyelids as he slipped into the pale early light. Elvis hailed a quiet taxi and instructed the driver to take him out to the desert edge. Beyond the strip's glitter and hum, they rumbled along cracked stretches of asphalt until a ramshackle warehouse appeared, its corrugated metal walls muting the world outside. Inside, the air was thick with dust motes drifting through shafts of morning sun. The cavernous room smelled of old sweat and rusted machinery. A single overhead light flickered, revealing a battered heavy bag dangling from a chain and a line of cracked mirrors along one wall. Here, he had come years before to train in secret with an old friend, Sensei Futaki's protege, a Japanese expatriate named Kenji Takahashi. Kenji stood waiting, lean and unmoving, eyes hooded beneath a faded brushstroke of graying hair. Behind him, a battered trunk held the scraps of uniforms and photographs of past students. Elvis closed the distance in a few purposeful strides. He wore street clothes, worn jeans, a loose tank top, but beneath, every muscle was coiled, ready. They bowed, and without fanfare, began. The first hour passed in silence, block after block, kick after thrust, each movement measured. Elvis felt every fiber protest under the renewed exertion, but also thrill, as though striking road-scarred leather could scrub away the dissonance in his mind. After each series of combinations, Kenji corrected his posture, pressing down on a raised elbow, adjusting his stance with the precision of a sculptor. At midday, Elvis paused, breathing onto his knuckles. Sweat dripped from his chin in rivulets. He stared at his reflection, hollow eyes beneath a familiar pompadour, and saw how far he'd drifted from the raw, driven young man who first walked into this very hall. Kenji spoke only once. "You carry weight today, more than you should." Elvis nodded, muscles trembling. Their training resumed, but now it took on a ritual quality. Elvis practiced kata, slow, deliberate forms that traced invisible lines through the dusty air. Each block, each strike, became an affirmation. "I remember why I learned this." Meanwhile, back on the strip, Frankie Cortez and the club owner quietly arranged for cameras to record the following night's friendly exhibition. They smirked at the idea of boosting ticket sales with the promise of Elvis versus Champ. But in the warehouse, under the empty rafters, no one spoke of publicity. Not Kenji, whose own trembling hands betrayed the memory of his master's final lesson: respect the art, or it abandons you. Not Elvis, who knew that any spectacle would betray everything he had come here to honor. As the sun dipped low, they concluded with sparring drills, control, restraint, an unspoken pact to hurt only as much as necessary. Elvis's final blow that day was a measured palm strike that would have floored a weaker opponent. Kenji nodded, a faint smile cracking his disciplined calm. Elvis unwrapped his hands, packed away his gloves in the trunk, and took one last long look around the silent dojo. He felt steadier than he had in years, rooted, centered, resolute. Tomorrow, he would step into the ring under Vegas lights. But tonight, he reclaimed something far more precious: his promise to karate, to himself, and to the memory of those who taught him how to stand firm when no one else was watching. The arena's roar had never felt so distant. From backstage, Elvis heard the muted thunder of expectation, thousands of fans eyeing the ring where he was to appear. The lights pulsed like a heartbeat, warming the polished floor underfoot. He paused for a moment, breathing steadily, feeling the weight of his decision settle in his chest. This would not be performance, but proof of discipline, dignity, and the promise he made long ago. He stepped through the curtain and into the glare. The jeers and cheers mingled as the spotlight found him, clad not in sequins, but in a simple white keikogi tied with a black belt. Across the ring, his opponent, Frank Bulldog Cortez, flexed exaggeratedly, muscles gleaming under the lights, grinning as though convinced of an easy victory. Cortez's entourage hollered encouragement. "Show us a spin, King! Do the dance!" Elvis's eyes swept the crowd, then locked onto Cortez's challengingly raised brow. He nodded respectfully once and retreated to his corner. The referee, a compact woman with a stern expression, stood between them, tapping each glove with a tiny mallet to signal the start. Ding! Cortez lunged first, a wild hook aiming for the ribs. Elvis slipped aside, hips shifting fluidly, as he had learned in the deserted dojo. The move wasn't showy, it was precise. He stepped in, delivering a palm strike to Cortez's chest that knocked the breath out of him and earned a collective gasp. But Cortez, angry and surprised, recovered with a bellow that echoed like a cannon shot. He rushed Elvis with a flurry of punches, each blow thudding against Elvis's forearms in rapid succession. The crowd's laughter turned uncertain as Elvis absorbed the assault without flinching, absorbing memory and muscle memory alike. He found an opening, a brief widening between Cortez's gloves, and delivered a short, straight punch to the solar plexus. Cortez stumbled, mouth open, eyes wide. The arena fell into a nervous hush, and Elvis felt the silence wash over him. He could have struck again, ended it decisively. But his master's voice echoed in his mind. Honor your opponent. Always. Instead, Elvis offered a simple counter. He stepped close, pressed Cortez's shoulder with a guiding palm, and gently directed him to bow. Cortez, panting, blinked, then, slowly, dipped his head in realization. The referee raised Elvis's hand. The thunder broke anew, but this time it was admiration. Fans leapt to their feet, some whooping, many cheering, others whispering in reverent awe. Elvis turned and bowed deeply to the crowd, then to Cortez. He leaned across the ropes and offered his hand to the fallen fighter. Cortez looked at that hand for a long moment, then clasped it. Backstage, photographers clamored for a shot, but Elvis did not linger. He stepped away from the ring into the wings and found his personal security, Joe, waiting. "Show's over," he said softly. Then, more quietly, he added, "But that's never why I learned it." That night, he returned to his suite alone. The city lights shimmered through rain-streaked windows. Elvis sank into a chair, removing the black belt from his waist and draping it over the back. He closed his eyes and let the night's adrenaline ebb away, replaced by a deep, fulfilling stillness, the calm that follows promise kept. In the early hours, his bedroom door creaked open. Lisa Marie padded in, sleep ragged across her face, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. She climbed onto the bed. Elvis opened his eyes and offered his arm. She nestled against him. They sat in silence, the only sound the slow pulse of the strip far below. He whispered in her ear, voice warm and steady, "Remember, baby girl, real strength is what you do when no one's watching." She nodded, mumbled softly, and drifted to sleep. Elvis gazed out at the glowing horizon, dawn breaking over a new day. He rose, retrieved his black belt, and tied it around his waist, in honor of a promise made, tradition upheld, and a legacy far greater than any applause. Justice, he knew, was silent, but its echo carried on forever.